Welcome to Get Wisdom Live with Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. What if God was also a co-host? What if the historically rare ability to question God directly and get profound answers back has been rediscovered? What would God say to today's sophisticated but deeply troubled world? Get Wisdom Live is here to share those answers with you. Here is Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. Another episode of Get Wisdom Live. I'm Brian Kelly, along with Get Wisdom founder and director, Carl Mollison. This month, Creator discusses using persuasion versus coercion. You know, it's hard for everybody in this world to get what they want out of life, Carl, and, persuasion helps a great deal in helping you get what you want. But we got to try to do it while being in divine alignment. And it turns out it's a little more tricky than I even thought.
Well, I can attest to that from all the things I've experienced and been a part of. And I just want to comment that this whole series we're doing with Get Wisdom Live is really a study in the art of living. And it's about living in divine alignment. And that's not a bad thing. It's not like, oh, you have to be humble and meek and minimalist and punitively look at everything as you're not entitled to things. Other people get that and not you. And it is the opposite. It's living. It's thriving and surviving. And so how you do that is the trick. And if you live in divine alignment and live effectively, you will thrive and survive, and you'll excel, because that's what we're meant to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So persuade versus coerce. That's the discussion. Yes.
And it's a long episode, so we're going to get started right now. Carl, you asked Creator. Themistocles said, I have with me two gods, persuasion and compulsion. Jenny Mullen said, I think the power of persuasion would be the greatest superpower of all time. Aesop said, persuasion is often more effectual than force. And James Altucher said, most people don't have the power of persuasion. Does this explain why so many turn to compulsion instead? What is Creator's perspective on persuasion versus coercion and persuasion as a superpower?
All right, and this is what I channeled from Creator of all that is. These are Creator's words. This issue is at the crux of the human dilemma, being at once connected and a family and an extension of our consciousness, and thus divine, but also being an independent force of your own, separate physically as far as your ordinary senses can tell you, and having to make your way in a world that presents many obstacles and many hazards. Given the privilege of free agency and free will, you are, in essence, forced to make your way largely on your own, and by virtue of your capabilities and how you interact with one another, especially in the modern world where everyone is largely dependent on others for much of their needs. The days of self-sufficiency are long gone in most areas of the world, with modern commerce and technology, where routine functions like agriculture are done on a massive scale to serve the many. And few have an independent ability to survive on their own without the help of others to provide goods and services of all kinds. The family structure as well is the first circle of influence and involvement with the broader humanity a new coming soul will encounter when they incarnate into the physical. In essence, each individual must win over others to be a full-fledged member of the clan or family grouping and not be ignored or ostracized or even cast out through force. This calls for many life skills and much knowledge to be obtained to keep up with expectations of growth and maturation, as well as phasing into a more mature adult role to be self-sustaining and a functional contributor to the group one belongs to, as well as being a good citizen in your community and perhaps involved with one or more other organizations, and must devote time and attention and energy to their needs. In every encounter, one is jockeying for position to get something or give something. That is the essence of existence, having interactions and opportunities to give something of the self or gain something through the gifts of others. When this is orchestrated by love, things go smoothly. When there are lower vibrations due to the buildup of frustration, injury, or mistreatment, the strained relationships may deteriorate further and lead to mayhem at extremes. The art of living is learning how to get along, be a part of things, if not a leader, and that requires talents of various kinds, both to have something to offer as well as being seen by others as worthy of their attention and gifting of things in return. The skills required to do this involve many times the choice between persuasion and a more forceful approach when it seems called for. This is where people are truly challenged when there is an obstacle of some kind or something is lacking in their lives and they must go begging or go looking and then might need to persuade others to let them in the door, so to speak, to have a turn, to have a place, perhaps a job within an organization in order to gain income. All along the way, the expectation is there will be growth, learning, and advancement. People strive in their career to achieve a higher rung in a corporate ladder or within a smaller organization to have greater responsibility and a raise in pay, and ultimately perhaps achieve a supervisory position with extra perks, and for some, even take over control of the business as their legacy. There are very few sole proprietors who do not require still many an assistance, and certainly in the wider world, customers and clients who appreciate them in what they do. So having the ability to make one's way and navigate what may at times be treacherous waters when conflicts arise and people compete with one another or are in opposition becomes a true test of strength, ability, as well as divine alignment. You can be sure that whatever takes place that represents something of importance in your life, it will be recorded in the Akashic records along with an energetic signature and an accounting of who did what to whom, who gave something, and who took something, who coerced someone else to get favored status or a gain of some kind at the other's expense, and who cooperated and assisted others to further mutual interests, but including others as well as the self. So this is a basic yardstick used again and again and again from day to day, and even moment to moment as a measure of individual divinity.
Boy, I think that last sentence is pretty doggone profound. That the art of persuasion versus coercion is actually a measuring stick of our individual divinity. That's pretty out there, Carl.
Well, I would say that's a pat on the back from God that you picked a pretty good topic to talk about this outing.
I appreciate that.
It's not a small thing.
No, not at all.
It comes up again and again, as Creator is saying, day to day, minute to minute. There are influences being exerted or wanting to be exerted, and a lot of work made to foster that and support it.
And anybody who's a parent knows this contest between persuasion and coercion.
Well, there you go. It's interpersonal relationships in a nutshell. And this is kind of like, is it positive? Is it negative? And well, what do you do about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So getting rewarded, giving rewards, dealing with adversity, punishment, criticism, neglect, all of those experiences that we have from time to time, because we're all competing.
Yeah.
in a kind of an ongoing free-for-all in many respects, all too often, where things are loosely coordinated or uncoordinated.
Yeah.
So there's much to be learned about how to make one's way, because it counts, and that's what creators just said.
Absolutely.
It's going to be recorded.
Yeah, absolutely. You ask, Creator, how much of the power of persuasion is a product of divinely bestowed soul attributes versus a learned skill that one acquires through trial and error over many lifetimes? If a learned skill, how is that skill transferred from lifetime to lifetime? Is it recorded in the Akashic records and made part of cellular memory during the fetus's formation? Or is it something wholly spiritual in nature, retained by the spirit itself? And if one learns the power of persuasion while incarnated, are there newly discovered persuasive powers on display in the light between lives as genuine learning? What can Creator tell us?
Okay, and these are Creator's words in answer. Your question presupposes your life in the physical is the sum total of your existence to date, expressed in one way or another with opportunities to learn, grow, and perhaps have some of the gains carry over into a new incarnation to make the next life more worthwhile, effective, and successful. In the first place, you are in a diminished mode as a physical being, living as a mere shadow of your soul, with only a small portion of your true capability available to you. So you are much greater than you know and have a much vaster array of skills, abilities, talents, and accomplishments than will ever be reflected in your life from human achievement. You are here to solve a problem, and in the doing must work at a handicap, being constrained, diminished, and corrupted as well, with a faulty culture and many dark influences manipulating your world and seeking to manipulate you also, to undermine things, get in your way, and overwhelm you ultimately. The purpose of this is to reckon with the largest of problems that exists within the universe. And that is the rise of evil within your galaxy. That is why you were created, to, in a sense, become a first responder, to reckon with wrongdoing. So what we are saying at the outset here is that the issue of how you deal with adversity is not only an important life skill with a myriad of choices and how to go about it, with penalties and liabilities if you fail. It is the very essence of your role and will determine your future from here on out, to the degree you are successful in overcoming the enormous obstacles you face each time you incarnate as a physical human. The larger issue is you are facing an enemy wanting to diminish, subjugate, and suppress you severely, and ultimately do you in. Keeping afloat, let alone being able to swim about in this ocean of negativity and malevolence, is no small thing. If you only have ordinary human concerns, you are truly blessed. Even if your life is a challenging and unrewarding one, you at least have the opportunity to participate and will learn from it. But more is expected of you than your personal success and happiness. You are here to serve the whole, not only those close to you, your family and friends, and not just the wider community you belong among, but the whole of existence. Things are not set up to be ideal. The learning is largely denied you because you start out in life in a state of ignorance, largely, other than your soul potential on board, but without a conscious awareness of all that has come before, who you are, why you are here, what you are up against, and what you need to accomplish to survive, as well as reach the broader goal charted for you through your creation. You must start from scratch as an infant and relearn everything in each new outing. That is a tremendous liability to begin with. You know far more as a light being than you will learn while incarnated, except for the issue of adversity and how best to manage it. That is the fundamental challenge that is unique to your physical realm. The challenges of being a physical living organism in a harsher environment than faced as a light being, coupled with those limitations and surrounded by the darkness ever encroaching and seeking your destruction, you will have ample tests of your resolve and capabilities to hold your own, to prevail, and to make a mark and leave an influence on things, hopefully for the better. You will need every ounce of strength, ingenuity, passion, and dedication you can muster. The developing fetus loses, bit by bit, the direct link to the divine realm via the higher self. There is literally a kind of separation functionally from being spirit as a light being to being enclosed within the body of a physical being that is dysfunctional because the levels of the mind have a major disconnection. And there is no possibility of direct communication between the largest part of your consciousness and what you are aware of through the workings of the brain and the upper subconscious and conscious levels of the mind you know about. So the biggest dilemma is not lack of knowledge and how much might carry over from life to life. It is your dilemma of being a kind of prisoner within your own body, where your mind is held hostage through disconnection. We have described this, and you have probed to discover it, as the deep subconscious. But it is the key to understanding the human dilemma. Why it is so difficult to make sense of things, even to control one's own feelings, which are often mysterious, with emotion coming out of nowhere, either an overreaction to something or a state of chronic anxiety, for example, without a logical basis many times. And what is happening is you are out of touch, in a sense, with reality, but do not understand this. So the dilemma of power and control over your own being starts with you. Each person has their own personal contest because you are needing to persuade yourself to overcome inner obstacles and create goals and incentives, a kind of reward and punishment prescription to help stay motivated and see to obligations that make sense to you and become important and will play a fundamental role in whether you will be happy or not as your life unfolds. So there indeed is a learning gap that not only causes you to start from behind and learn and relearn everything you need to know as a human, you in many ways are a stranger to yourself and must relearn who you are. This is not natural, but a purposeful diminishment you have been subjected to, and adds to the importance and the urgency in gaining mastery of things through life skills.
Well, I think a really interesting sentence from this channeling was where Creator says that the point of being here and a dilemma we don't have in light is handling adversity, learning to cope with and handle adversity. Apparently, we don't have a lot of adversity back in the light. And in response to that, I would want to say that we've heard from Creator before that the astral plane, the place where we go when we immediately die between getting from Earth to the light, is considered an extension of the physical plane. It's considered like an extension of Earth. That's where the term earthbound comes from. So there are spirits, and they deal with adversity, but they're not in the light technically. So I thought that was a really interesting distinction.
Well, this is a unique place, and the purpose is to see what happens when you flirt with going over the line, getting out of divine alignment to a significant extent. It happens here in a way it doesn't yet happen with light beings. Creator wants to give greater freedom, greater independence of all the beings throughout the universe. But right now, dares not do that because the experiment in trying it has not gone well.
No.
And, our galaxy is the test case to see, will this work? Can it work? And so far, it's been very mixed and a very dark series of problems from this rise in evil that's happened. So it's reckoning with that and fixing it that's the acid test. And it's up to us to save the day and show this can be done. Once things go wrong and problems appear and evil breaks out on the scene, can it be beaten back? Can it be overcome and rebalanced and brought back into alignment? Even with all the things working against you, living in a place that's so challenging that evil arises. See, this is why it's a test. It's sort of like becoming a Navy SEAL or something where you've got to learn a lot of strength skills, and you're challenged in ways the average being is not, and that's us. We're thrown into the deep end of the pool here in the earth, and we have a lot of work we have to do to overcome this.
Oh, no doubt about it. And real quick, go to getwisdom.com to figure out how you can help. That was implied in what Carl said there. So we're here to do something. We're here with a mission. Getwisdom.com. Carl, you asked Creator, persuasion is the power to affect change or perhaps prevent change. And even though there is a distinction made between persuasion and compulsion, the threat of compulsion can, in and of itself, be highly persuasive. The iconic fire and brimstone sermons delivered with great theatrics by eloquent ministers comes to mind. A fearmonger, or one who peddles fear, also comes to mind. What is Creator's perspective of persuasion as compulsion?
All right, and this is what Creator tells us. There can indeed be a fine line between yearning and hoping and feeling inner passion, and then out of frustration, perhaps acting rashly to force an issue, to make something happen, and even punish the self. Everything you do has consequences, even inaction. In that sense, life will not let you alone. Sooner or later, there will be a wake-up call of one sort or another. And if there has been a state of denial, you will find yourself having been left behind and might need to work twice as hard to catch up. So there is a useful place for both approaches, persuasion and coercion, because one is an extension of the other. This is reflected in many ways in cultural expressions and definitions of the role you have as a human being and the various strategies you can choose among in making your way. The adage often expected of a leader can be summarized in the phrase, "Speak softly, but carry a big stick." This reflects the reality that at times when people refuse to pay attention or listen to reason, and there is a danger of harm looming, it may well seem justifiable to penalize someone or a group as a way to persuade them to change their behavior. Where the line is crossed is often clear, but just as often becomes a gray area and is the most difficult when people lack power to begin with and may not have the option available to coerce those in authority to change a ruling or judgment, leaving the self at a disadvantage and chafing under the restrictions and limitations that result. So this concept and the delicate balance represented by the choice to persuade or coerce happens at all levels of society. It is always a potential hazard from one's own government if there are difficult circumstances, perhaps a natural disaster, lack of resources, civil unrest, famine, widespread poverty, or even organized warfare. These things will first develop through people being out of alignment and not using discernment and moral precepts in guiding their choices, whether to persuade or coerce. And the more out of alignment things get, the more difficult it becomes to get back into balance. And the growing unfairness experienced more and more widely fuels the flames of discontent. So, the very problem of governance is the challenge of keeping people in line and satisfied enough they will behave and not become a problem for the authorities. You can see in the workings of society what it takes to establish authority and a body of rules to go by. These are codified in the huge body of laws needed to define the many complexities and nuances of human interaction, all designed to avoid misunderstanding, but then causing some negative outcome. Many times, fairness is in the eye of the beholder, like beauty, and even the law open to quite differing interpretations. But it is the best humans have come up with to try to maintain order, with the objective being to have things running smoothly. The laws represent a cudgel that can be brought down on transgressors, but mostly serve as guardrails to keep people on a common path, staying within the boundaries of the rules and regulations and contributing in a positive way to society rather than to be a disruptive force. Every departure from being in balance has a consequence and will be recorded within the Akashic records, and people will feel quite keenly when treated unfairly. And many times there will be long term consequences because people have limits in what they can tolerate. So, here again is this sliding scale from use of persuasion to coercion and how one responds to unfair treatment.
You know, I was actually talking with some of these ideas with a friend of mine, and he said something pretty interesting. He said that governments will often go for a group win over individuals, so that, if you have an individual with a problem, you might get run roughshod over the government because they're looking for that group win and they don't really care about you as an individual. So, trying to navigate in a world where that's a reality is very challenging as well. So this is very on point discussion by Creator.
Well, we're getting down to brass tacks. We talk a lot, and so does everyone else involved with spirituality, about your vibration, having the highest possible vibration, being in balance. And we've expressed this idea many times because it is central that the whole idea of the desire of Creator is to move forward, to grow, learn, and do so in a way that maintains a balance of good versus bad, positive versus negative. And when we get out of balance, we have to do something to get back into that balance. Well, here we're seeing in a very practical way, you can think of this balance as needing either persuasion or coercion, either of oneself to, suck it up and try harder or work harder, or persuade others to join with you if you need them. And the same is true of the government. Government needs us, if nothing else, to not make trouble and to do useful work and pay taxes and things like that, because otherwise it all falls apart. So this is an important discussion, and it affects everything.
Yeah, and it's the learning, I think, that Creator has pointed out that we're taking on here. This is learning to deal with adversity, right? It's like our whole very lives are just adversity from the moment we get up to the moment we go to bed. Where's my coffee, right? So, this is the challenge, and you're trying to draw a distinction between persuasion and coercion throughout your day with everybody you're dealing with, whether it's your boss or your wife or your kids, or the neighbor, or the judge of the courtroom. This is an ongoing challenge for everybody. So it's quite a fascinating conversation.
Indeed.
Okay, you asked Creator, It is interesting to note that the iconic snake oil salesman never had a storefront like a pharmacy, but instead pulled into town with his wagon and hawked his magical products directly to the crowds, and then often hightailed it out of there to the next town before the truth of his products became more widely known. Google defines snake oil salesmen as those who deceive people in order to get money from them. The successful ones were highly persuasive people. When one has such ability, it seems so puzzling that such a person could not find a legitimate avenue in which to practice those skills and be successful without all the ignominy. Good salespeople are in demand everywhere and for everything. Why resort to fraud? What could Creator tell us about exploiting the masterful use of persuasion to willfully engage in fraud?
Well, it seems like that's a growing problem.
Yeah, it
there's
does.
there's so many people out there exploiting others and preying on them. All the scammers and the manipulations and crazy promotions that end up being cheap goods that fall apart, and the
Yeah, it's becoming endemic.
imitations. Yeah, yeah. So it's a very widespread issue. And it seems clear people aren't making highly in alignment choices
No.
in how they persuade versus coerce or fool. And that's a kind of problem right there. So this is what Creator says about willful engagement and fraud. What you're describing is what is seen as surface characteristics with respect to having a talent for persuasion, coupled on a deeper level with a lack of morality when it comes to acting with integrity. While there's a sliding scale from persuasion to coercion, the various nuances and gradations along the way reflect, in fact, numerous soul attributes that blend together in making a kind of composite wherewithal. And ultimately, in the choice of behaviors leading to an outcome, there will be many strengths and weaknesses contributing to the sum total of all that happens. Someone who uses their charm, intelligence, and natural gifts to convince others to follow their example or take their advice are drawing on inner strengths, but of a narrow kind. So the snake oil salesman is a good example of an incomplete human being with respect to a basic array of soul attributes needed to be centered as well as strong and capable as an independent being. When morality is lacking or compromised, so the person is too self-serving with a sense of entitlement, lacking in empathy for others, and believing they are the most important consideration, their needs, their personal comforts, their position in society, and their security, the temptation is to take shortcuts to gain things for the self by taking them away from others if need be. So the snake oil salesman is basically a kind of criminal engaged in theft, but in a clever way that relies on the ability to persuade others to hand over their money rather than use coercion to rob them forcefully through use of a threat. The best that can be said here is that this is a more genteel life of criminality than being an armed robber. But the law of karma will see this as having many flaws because theft is theft, no matter how it comes about. Even when it is never noticed, it taints the soul of the thief. And they will be forced to reckon with it eventually through the law of karma, bringing back around this imbalanced energy they have caused to have a reckoning and perhaps lose what they gained and then some.
I am just constantly amazed with Creator's use of the English language, right? A more genteel life of criminality. I had that one evoked a giggle on my part, but boy, the whole thing is profound. What Creator is saying here, that essentially a snake oil salesman is really just a criminal, and they're engaging in a kind of coercion that fraud is, right? I mean, it's not armed robbery, not putting a gun to somebody's head, but if you're fooling them, you're lying to them, you're misrepresenting.
Well, this is something that you can see in the culture is actively flirted with and admired at times. The successful con man, people wish they could be like that, and just pick people's pockets and get away with it. And it looks all so easy and justifiable to get the good life or whatever. And it's so shallow. And that's what Creator's pointing out. It comes with a price and a cost to the perpetrator. Are you there, Brian? We lost you suddenly. Cannot hear you. Have you disconnected yourself from the program? Or have I been disconnected?
Hey, Gar, are you back?
I'm here. Are you here?
Yeah, I lost internet for a moment.
Oh, well, that's the deep state. That's not us. Okay.
Well, it did it between questions, so at least it's it's helpful as far as that goes, right?
Well, sorry.
Yeah, we'll launch into the next one. So, you ask Creator, when does a study of some of the most effective salespeople, when one does a study of some of the most effective salespeople, one often encounters a mixed bag of ethically questionable tactics. One extremely successful car salesman would sit down with a phone book, call people, and tell them their new car was ready for pickup. When people inevitably said, "Well, I didn't order a car," he would profusely apologize, then immediately segue into asking them if they were at all in the market for a new car. With this approach, he made a fortune and set the world record at the time for the most non-fleet sales made by a car salesman, one customer at a time. Now, to his credit, he was extremely likable, attentive, thorough, and did great customer service, sent birthday cards to his customers, etc. Nevertheless, a lot of his success was predicated on a lie and deception. What is Creator's perspective?
All right, Creator tells us, here is another example of the shades of gray represented by self-interest versus being in balance, where people are acting through free will. So this dilemma of needing to make a living is one of the hallmarks of the adversity you face in the physical realm as a human being. This creates quite an important imperative, and people find themselves many times in situations where they will make a basic compromise of some kind in order to stay afloat economically. There are many such compromises in all of society, in all of commerce. In essence, the competition creates a setting where people are forced to participate in one scheme or another to get money from others. When signing on as an employee, you become an agent of that organization, and your work will contribute to their gains, some of which will be shared with you. To the extent it does useful work as a contribution to the broader community, this will be a positive endeavor in all respects. To the extent it represents an enticement, perhaps something trivial or wasteful or empty, it will have lesser value and ultimately becomes a net negative for those who squandered their resources because they were enticed to engage in frivolous activities or buying useless products. And it is only later, when they're pinched by budget constraints, that the hole in their wallet becomes a problem. So in this example, persuasion is used to entice people with a reward, and as a change agent, creating that apparent choice by bringing the subject up and creating that image of the potential customer seeing themselves in a shiny new car might well be something not healthy in the moment. Much of society is like this, with a relentless advertising inserted in almost every platform, conveying information and entertainment. While it can be highly useful to know the array of goods and services in existence, there are many who, in effect, become preyed upon through persuasion to make poor choices and get themselves into debt. Much of commerce is set up to exploit such individuals through extension of credit, with credit cards charging usurious rates for the privilege of having access to borrowed money. There is wisdom in the biblical saying, neither a borrower nor a lender be. The principles of caveat emptor, let the buyer beware, seeming to absolve the seller or the persuader of responsibility, are a practical solution from one vantage point, but they favor those offering goods and services over the consumer, who is at a disadvantage when subject to the enticements of persuaders of all kinds, hawking their wares and trolling the waters for prey, baiting the hooks with all kinds of offerings. The law of karma will see all such conduct as predatory. It might be short of coercion, but the false intrusion into people's lives is an overt act and will be seen as a transgression.
Well, those last two sentences were essentially an answer that I've been looking for and wondering about for a very long time, long before we even get wisdom, right? So this example of the car salesman, using really what is a almost negligible white lie that most people would never be upset about, but it still is a deception, right? And here, Creator is saying emphatically, the law of karma will see all such conduct as predatory. It might be short of coercion, but the false intrusion into people's lives is an overt act and will be seen as a transgression. Wow.
Well, the divine has high standards. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah, who would have thought? And the issue really is, what's wrong with us that we don't know that, we don't see it, we don't live by it, and we get so out of alignment in so many things that go on. And it's all around us. I mean, it's really quite a gross display of wretched excess and a scramble for power and control and who wins out in the information game.
And keeping up with the Joneses.
Keeping up with the Joneses, and also politics and getting people to act and behave the way you want, and maybe ostracizing them and canceling them if they don't go along.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
these are all reprehensible acts that will get noticed and be put on record. And someday we'll have to answer for having been in this kind of collective maelstrom of evil doing of a greater or lesser sort, I guess, is we have to acknowledge. It's not an exaggeration, but there are degrees.
But Carl, everyone's doing it.
Yeah, well, there you go. There's the slippery slope.
That is the slippery slope. Oh, boy. You ask Creator, in reference to the above car salesman's success, he was successful because he was good at cold calling, which most people have a deep aversion to. Cold calling is one of the most obvious breaches of the golden rule there is. Almost everyone hates getting cold calls, and yet most successful salespeople will assert that you need to do it in order to be successful. Brian remembers one boiler room telephone canvasser who bragged how she abused anyone who cold called her, but had no problem doing cold calling for a living. The stark hypocrisy was dramatic and utterly remorseless and unapologetic. She literally thought it was hilarious and laughed about it. Brian found it disturbing, to say the least. What is Creator's perspective?
All right, and this is what Creator says. As we have discussed, there are many on a slippery slope where persuasion slides into coercion and, in a sense, contravenes free will. The adage, live and let live, comes to mind here, to let people go about their business, go about their lives. But in a frenetic world, Businesses will not wait for people to come to them. And this is understandable given the disconnection inherent in the makeup of existence in the physical plane. You must be within range of the senses of others to be noticed. How to get their attention becomes the number one problem of many businesses. To do so unobtrusively is quite difficult. But the fact that a coercive act, such as cold calling, will often get results does not make it morally sound and in divine alignment. There are many situations involving moral compromise in the nature of the world, and this includes many wholesale sectors of society set up through the advent of technology, oftentimes, to exploit others through persuasion and often bordering on coercion to get their attention in the first place. And that is what is the essence of the cold caller. They, in a sense, are hijacking your day, entering your home under false pretenses, or catching you unawares through a phone call and distracting you from doing useful work, for example. That is a small thing at the outset, but when it results in an economic loss or some other diminishment through lost time, the liability grows, and so will the karmic debt of the cold caller, setting things in motion. So your accurate description of the repugnance people feel in many cases to take on that role, to be a salesperson making cold calls for an organization, for example, is not only because people might not be skilled in the art of persuasion, but will experience inner conflict. And this can include the pricking of their conscience via the higher self, sensing intuitively it is out of divine alignment. And this will cause inner disquiet. So it is more than feeling ill-suited, just in terms of one's personal skill set. It involves a moral dilemma to some degree as well, depending on the nature of the goods and services being offered.
Well, I can attest to that moral dilemma. And in fact, that very moral dilemma is in many ways created this show, Carl. It's been something that I explored in depth when I was in the 1980s. And the memories of that and some of the questions I've had have carried forward to this very day. And I'm now in a position to put it in front of Creator, so it's very interesting. The next question is going to kind of break that down a little bit more. So we'll jump into the next question. You ask Creator, cold calling works precisely because so many people have an aversion to doing it. That alone makes it a successful strategy for those who can bring themselves to do it. Brian did sales in the late 80s and struggled with this dilemma. A rule of thumb is that it takes 10 calls to get a lead, 10 leads to get an appointment, and 10 appointments to get a sale. Brian demonstrated to himself that, indeed, the formula works and managed to get a house listing as a result. But rather than being encouraged by his success, he was so overcome with guilt about disturbing people eating dinner that he eventually abandoned sales as a career altogether. Cold calling cannot work if everyone does it. Everyone's phone would ring all day long, and it would be utterly chaotic and untenable. There is the idea that if everyone can't, then maybe no one should. What is Creator's perspective?
And Creator says, the practical impossibility of having everyone engaged in a form of coercion, dressed up as using the art of persuasion, but actually being coercive, shows quite clearly the tale of woe that ensues from engaging in the practice. It might be a series of many, many small inconveniences, but those add up to quite a large impact on things when seen collectively. The fact that if it were done on a wide scale means everything would grind to a halt in terms of useful productivity is simply bringing the practice into the light of day. Through this thought experiment, showing the fact that there are many small thefts of time and productivity, including the participation of the cold caller in a fruitless exchange most of the time, in order to occasionally find someone who is a good match to the offering so it becomes a win-win with a successful sale. We would say that persuading someone to buy something they don't really need, or might be a lesser choice than they might discover if left to their own devices to do their own investigating and exploration of what is out there, and not simply be coerced to engage with a cold caller and manipulated with a pre-selected narrow offering. The very description of what it takes to run a business that way speaks to inefficiency and a kind of drudgery that will be shared by the cold caller and the potential clients who say no. So your reaction to seeing this series of intrusions ending in rejection and being a party to it, as well as witnessing disappointments again and again, was in divine alignment, because your conscience was signaling you to make a course correction and stop doing what you were doing.
Wow. Well, I can say emphatically that is indeed how I felt at the time. And boy, are we getting a really good look at what Creator thinks of cold calling, Carl. He doesn't think much of it, that's for sure.
Well, it speaks to the broader issues at hand. What is the world like? What should it be like? And what do we do about that gap? And adding to the mayhem is not the answer.
Right. Right.
We were already seeing, there's limits to what can be tolerated without a collapse of everything into chaos and failure.
Yeah. It reminds me of something I listened on a podcast a couple of days ago where somebody said, the approach that most individuals are taking to the difficult times in front of us now are to gather as much wealth as you can so that things don't affect you, right? Like diverse, problems and catastrophe can happen to everybody else, but I got enough of my own stuff that I'm okay. And that seems to be everybody's focus. But the result of that disparate focus is that nobody's working collectively to solve the problems. They're only looking out for themselves. So.
Well, and what comes to mind for me in thinking about this is we often appreciate the distinction and are reminded, if you're in a time of peace versus a time of war, you're very lucky, you're very blessed. And that's a huge demarcation between good and bad.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
But in actuality, what it makes me realize is we're still at war, even in peacetime.
Yeah.
It's just on a more genteel level, as Creator was commenting, and you were noticing, a genteel form of criminality.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, this is a tough environment we live in down here, isn't it? Oh, geez. You ask Creator, breaking the ice is a phrase in common usage. The online free dictionary defines the term this way: to do something as a means of reducing or eliminating shyness, awkward tension, or unfamiliarity. So much of persuasion founders on this iceberg that the term is quite an ingenious summation of a problem requiring great skill to master. When someone knows or learns how to break the ice effectively, the world is literally their oyster. This is clearly a very important art of living skill and lesson that so many people would benefit from mastering but struggle with intensely. What divine insight can Creators share about this common dilemma and challenge?
All right, these are Creator's words. Here we have the opposite extreme, in contrast to the brash salesperson who may have no qualms about intruding on the privacy of others to get their attention and will manipulate them as much and for as long as they need to in order to get a sale. Hence the term getting a foot in the door, to literally block the ability of their sales prospect to say no. Many people are intimidated by others because of a state of anxiety or simply lack of life experience, leading to hesitation that creates a source of anxiety and becomes self-perpetuating when confronted by strangers, especially in a setting where they might feel the need to perform in some way. So there are many circumstances in the course of daily life where people are put in positions where they need to hold their own, if not take a leadership role in some kind of useful exchange, in providing knowledge, information, or requesting something, either for personal benefit or on behalf of an organization they work for. Loneliness is one of the worst of human dilemmas because it is an inhuman existence, given your makeup that no one is an island. So the art of living requires finding the inner wherewithal to do some kind of outreach, if only to engage with the invitation of another actively enough to have a successful interchange. So this is indeed a basic requisite of having a happy life, to learn how to be cordial and fit in with others, perhaps making small talk as a sign of recognition and respect for the presence of someone else. Being a wallflower might be a need for self-preservation by a highly anxious person, but it may also be seen by others as a sign they are being rejected by the wallflower who ignores them. And thus there is a lost opportunity because nothing gets started. So we see the ability to break the ice is not only important, but sometimes essential because it is an indicator of inner wherewithal, starting with having enough self-confidence to engage because a person feels they do have something to offer. This reflects a healing need when there is great difficulty in being able to deal with others comfortably and hold one's own. The inability to find a way to fit in, to engage meaningfully, to gain recognition and basic acceptance, to become a part of a gathering or group, or even a party to a one-on-one exchange, is a liability needing a healing intervention and will often have deep karmic roots from past trauma, leaving a person with deep inner wounds, contributing to the lack of wherewithal, limiting them.
We're not asking about it here, but it's interesting that Creator talks about the wallflower, uses that word three times here, because it's also true that some people are very good at breaking the ice, but then even that stems from a source of anxiety on their part. They can't stand being in a silent room, right, where nobody's talking. That would drive them crazy. And also breaking the ice means that they get to control the conversation, choose the topic, and kind of maintain the control of the situation. So it's not a clear black and white issue either way, but it's very interesting the insights that the Creator is sharing with us on this.
Well, it's kind of the opposite of the cold caller who could hold their own anywhere and maybe get you to buy them lunch in the course of a casual starting of an acquaintanceship.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas the wallflower is just cut off and alone and suffers. And actually that suffering in witnessed by others is discomforting.
Yeah.
You steer around those kind of people because they're not happy and you don't want to intrude on them. You don't want to make things worse. It's more of a burden at the outset than an opportunity, and what it looks like anyway. So this really cuts you off if you don't have that wherewithal. So again, it's a matter of balance, being competent and capable, but not abusing your skills.
I mean, that's why, I think back in my own childhood, and I think one of the most traumatic experiences was probably the 8th grade dance. Just it was torture. It was hell. Oh boy, life is a challenge, Carl. That's all I can say.
Well, let's get to the answers.
Here we go. Here's the answers coming right up. Carl, you asked Creator, like so many things dragging us down in this world, an inability to master the art of persuasion has to be up there pretty high on the list. How much of this is a deep healing need requiring divine intervention to resolve? How can empowered prayer, the Lightworker healing protocol, deep subconscious mind reset, and divine life support help to heal the barriers to becoming a persuasive individual? How can divine partnership ensure that the power of persuasion is used to uplift rather than abuse?
All right, and this is Creator's answer. While some people suffer from an excess of personality, having an over-exuberant nature, making them irrepressible, and thus quite willing to engage with others and end up imposing on them, Most people have the opposite problem because they are beaten down by life in so many ways, so much of the time, with things being set up to be always a competition. This is the end result of the subjugation and manipulation from living in a world ruled by interlopers. You are literally trained by government-run schools to be subservient and experience too many repeated failures from being judged continually and graded in an arbitrary fashion by those with authority, applying external rules and standards with a one-size-fits-all approach. That is a prescription for diminishment and contributing much wounding to undermine people having many lifetimes of hardship and painful circumstances ending in misery and perceived failure. This becomes a karmic dilemma because everything that happens during your life is your responsibility to cope with, surmount, and transcend. When this does not happen, it leaves a wound, and that will have karmic consequences regardless of whether it is caused by your inattention or weakness or being overwhelmed by evil intentions of others. The sum total of all the bad things that happen will likely be much greater than the good that can bring a karmic blessing or reward of some kind. The bad things will come back around to keep challenging each person. The logic of this system is that no one gets away with anything. In an ultimate sense, sooner or later, the universe requires you to rebalance what you participated in causing a misalignment. This is why the act of enlightenment, to reach a spiritual pinnacle, is primarily a healing journey, not simply a learning curve with respect to knowledge alone. Everyone is coming from behind, from this backlog of unhealed trauma, and the consequences of having so many things go wrong will be the accumulation of a huge assortment of negative beliefs about all kinds of things that are deeply held, many not even in conscious awareness. These will suppress the expression of useful soul attributes like confidence, courage, and a desire to engage and spend time with others, because such opportunities will trigger inner fear, doubt, and uncertainty. And that can become life-limiting and lead to a downward spiral. This is how people end up turning to substance abuse or lead inefficient and ineffective lives and may end up homeless and in despair. When soul attributes become corrupted, suppressed, or unbalanced, perhaps for karmic reasons, and a person lacks certain aspects of wherewithal from the outset, they will be doomed to repeat mistakes of the past, miss opportunities, or fumble things and experience yet another failure. The only way to replace negative beliefs and modify the expression of soul attributes as a part of your nature is to receive divine intervention. Human psychology has innovated a number of therapeutic strategies designed to assist people with the process of coming into better alignment in how they think and feel. And this will help to support the good and let go of the bad. But there are severe limits on how much people can change, even with the help of a skilled therapist. Much of the inner makeup is not in direct personal control of the conscious mind. And that is why divine intervention is the key. This can be requested through prayer and high-level healing requests through the Lightworker Healing Protocol and Deep Subconscious Mind Reset Protocol to bring about a direct interplay between a human facilitator working on behalf of a person in need as an advocate to bring about a divine participation in a healing campaign to right the wrongs of their personal history, to remove what works against them, and add back in what is missing or suppressed in their soul attributes to make them whole again. Given the sum total of karmic wounding from hundreds of challenging lifetimes will take some concerted time and effort to surmount. But this is not only necessary to gain inner calm and peace, but to regain enough divine alignment to enable a broad ascension to be launched. That is Creator's plan for humanity, to ascend to a higher plane of existence and leave the physical altogether. Our intention was never for you to live forever in the physical with the constant difficulty and challenges and restrictions it represents, but only to be there long enough to solve the problem of dealing with adversity, the rise of evil in particular, and gain the wisdom from conquering these challenges so as to remain in divine alignment no matter what. That is what brings true strength, resilience, stability, and safety. When you are in divine alignment, you are impervious to harm. The way to get there is to partner with the divine at the outset of the journey. You cannot do it alone. You can call on us to help you, and you must do so to get that help. Under the rules of engagement, if you do not reach out to us, we must leave you alone to honor your free will choice. There is much to do for each human being to help themselves as well as others. Those who are further along can become healers and mentors of those who are less aware without help and will flounder and perish. Each person will choose their destiny. That is part of the exercise underway. You are being given a call to action by Get Wisdom. And if you pay attention and heed the warnings, we can assure you we are available to you at all times, and together will not fail.
I want to repeat what Creator said here. The only way, not one way, Carl, but the only way to replace negative beliefs and modify the expression of soul attributes as a part of your nature is to receive divine intervention. It's not one way, Carl. It's the only way. And that when we're in divine alignment, we are impervious to harm. Well, the only way to achieve that is to get into divine alignment. And to do that, you need divine intervention. And that you have to ask for. And that's what Get Wisdom is all about, Carl.
It sure is. And it leaves everything outside that critical facilitation. Everything else is a partial solution, more of a band-aid, more of a symptomatic assist, like pharmaceuticals. They don't heal chronic disease. They treat symptoms alone. In the spiritual realm, energy healing, I'm sorry, in stepping on toes here, it's not the answer. It's a symptomatic alleviation you can achieve for some time, perhaps, but it will not heal what is damaged. And the bad outcomes will bubble up again and the symptoms will return. So it's a treadmill, like what we do typically in our lives. We're just holding our own and doing the best we can, and we limp along. And we're not running, we're not striding, we're not gaining ground most of the time. So we've got to get going. And the way to do it is through healing. It is the answer.
And you can learn more about that at getwisdom.com. That's all we have for this month's Get Wisdom Live. Thanks, everybody.
Good luck and be well.